Hello friends, my name's Alckemy. Today I'm going to be attempting to try to describe a pretty abstract topic that is hard for me to put eloquently, but I'm going to do my best. It is reshaping the way that you listen and reference music in a few different contexts. So let's talk about one of the big ones that I find a lot of people do that they get into. And the first, I would want to say like issue, or not really like issue, but trap that people run into is they get very specific on how they listen to stuff. With this, you ever listen to a song and then you're like, you point out one sound and then you're like, oh, that's the coolest sound I've ever heard. And then you spend a freaking eternity trying to remake that sound. Story of my life. Don't do that. It's not really worth your time, at least in my opinion. The thing is that when you are listening to music, especially if you're listening critically, it is very easy to become extremely clinical about very fine details because our ears are attuned to it, to where you hyper focus on like one part of the song as opposed to looking at the way that it's set up, the whys of what goes into what you just heard, and the compositional aspects that make everything what makes that moment so special, if that makes sense. So one of the biggest things that I could try to pass on to you is to not get into so specific learning or specific recreation of copying stuff. In some cases that can be helpful, so like if I have this loop right here, let's say I wanted to make this loop a little bit more off time. So let me just listen to it real quick. Okay, so everything is already a little bit late, which is okay, but let's say I wanted to make this into something that is a little bit more, I don't know how I would make this. What we can do is kind of just make everything else a little bit later and then make the snare a little bit early, and then we can just copy this right here. Actually, these are a little bit cool, and then let's move that over kind of like there. Let's see what that sounds like. Cool. Now you see what I just did there? This is something that I think is a really important thing because this is like part of my personal learning journey. There's something that out there that exists called Dilettime, and Dilettime is a book. I don't remember who it's written by, and to be honest with you, I haven't even read it. And I think that it covers some topics about how, Jay Dilla wrote some of his beats and stuff, and I think that the breakdown aspect of it is really cool because that person goes really deep into, specifics about what makes Jay Dilla's beats so unique or whatever. But like the thing is that they gets into like very specific advice of like taking all the hi-hats and making them late, as opposed to, let me just for context make this a lot louder and then move this over. So here's the transient of all these, and these would all be in time, right? And so there's very specific advice of like moving stuff off and going like this, or if you want to do it by hand, then you can do it like this. This is a very common trick within NPCs and hardware and stuff, to where people will do stuff like this that gives it its shuffle. Okay, so while this is true in some cases, like I think that it's very easy to fall into like specifics of that is the only thing that he did. Like you have to keep in mind that musicians like that have musicianship within them, and there's a certain part of humanistic expression that you need to take into account whenever you listen to what it is that these people do. And my advice to you on something like this, and I'm not saying that any of these people are wrong when it comes into humanizing beats, when it comes into stuff like that at all, but you have to like take into account that you got to bring some of that back, and that these people, a lot of times, Jay Dilla, Madlib, and all that stuff would just play stuff or move stuff off grid in a way that doesn't really make sense. So, or at least that wouldn't, traditionally make sense. So for example, if I wanted to start a hat on the one, this isn't about Jay Dilla, but just about, trying to not get into specifics that are too specific. Then taking a listen to this, to where you move stuff a little bit late, a little bit late, a little bit later. Well, now you've got a different kind of shuffle, kind of like this. If we add some dynamics to this, and then maybe we add in a little bit of pitching right here. That's a little bit overboard, but what we've done is we've created a much more humanistic approach to this kind of swing, and we can pit it up with the original beat and see how that fares up. Now we can create a syncopation with this. And now you'll see that through fiddling with this and through messing around with this, the beat that we've created, even though these drums are very soft, has been a much more humanistic approach and something that sounds a lot closer to what's going on. Just playing a bang on beat or whatever that's straight on is not going to get you there. You have to figure out how to listen to the vibes. You have to learn to listen to the groove of what that person is evoking. And the better that you get at that, the more that you even practice audiating that kind of thing. It changes the way that you start to listen to these beats. It changes the details that you start focusing on. And it's not getting so specific as to, I guess you could, but pulling the beat out and recreating it and doing all that. Like, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but what that teaches you is it teaches you how to copy. It doesn't teach you how to groove. It doesn't teach you how to get a feel for whatever is happening. And that's probably the most important thing when it comes into doing that kind of stuff. And so while I would say that, something like Dilettime is a great reference, while I would say that it's a great starting point, when it comes into what you're paying attention to, because I know that there's a difference between reading and listening, but what you're trying to cultivate is not the how, but the why and the essence of what makes something so special. For example, if you've got a bass sound or whatever that you hear in a Cohen track or a Cohen soundtrack, right? It goes. A lot of times people just focus on that specific part, right? Just that specific sound, and they'll go and just try to recreate that over and over and over, and fall down this rabbit hole. But it's the way that it's set up. It's the relationship that it has with the rest of the track that makes it a special thing. That's why, and a huge trap of what I was talking about in the last video, why a lot of people struggle with bass lines out of making like mud pies and stuff or whatever. If you don't know what that is, it's randomized bass sounds that have different kinds of movement that is not fit within a particular like LFO or something. It's just, having a knob twisting session and recording whatever it is that you get out of it. But that's why a lot of times people have a hard time contextualizing that stuff, because they're not looking at the relationship of, what makes it what it is. And it's not always that easy to identify, but whenever you listen to these kinds of tracks or tracks that inspire you, even when you are referencing something, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is like, try to stray away as soon as possible, because everyone's a beginner at some point, you know what I mean? But try to stray away as soon as possible from copying and just doing recreations, and instead try to focus on what makes the vibe and the soul of the track. So this trick that I've shown you, I use this all the time whenever it comes into writing riffs and all that stuff. And that's what I want to go into as well, is when you're looking at how to find riffs for tracks and why sampling and why even remixing, those two, in my opinion, go hand in hand, start to expand massively if you allow it. So there's nothing wrong with sampling, and there's nothing wrong with remixing stuff or whatever. And to me, this is a beginning point. I say it's a beginning point, but there are like, insane legends that this is as far as they go, and they make really great tracks out of it. But from somebody like me who is really big into sound design, somebody that has been trying to really find my own sound and whatnot, this is where we begin in the first place. So right now I have this track. It's called Memory Meadows. It's a track that I wrote in 2017, but I've thrown this into Serato Sample and I've chucked it in. And one of the most common things that people do is they go into like finding chops, right? So there we go. We found one. And then they record that, and then they make their beat out of that. And that's cool. But there's so much more to be had from this. And the thing is that while I still would appreciate some kind of slicer or something for different purposes within something like Bitwig, I know that Ableton has one, I know that FL has one, MPC, blah, blah, blah. The thing with this is that how do I explain this? Like, there is some aspect of conforming your imagination to only try to regurgitate what it is that you hear, or the depth that you're willing to go in order to find stuff is only as much as the sample that you're pulling from. Like, yeah, you might time stretch it. You might, again, change the pitch or whatever. Marlo Diggs is a great example of actually somebody that says something pretty profound, which is not trying to necessarily stick within like forcing everything within the time of like not being afraid to like find different samples that are out of time slightly or whatever, because that is one of the ultimate keys that you can utilize when you are either sampling or resampling or finding riffs in between. Now, when we talk about the listening aspect of this, what I want to try to instill with you is bringing awareness to hearing riffs within just everything. It could be my voice. It could be the birds outside. It could be, it's like that one TikTok video where, the guy walks outside and everybody is utilizing their car to unlock the door to where it's like, doot, doot. And then someone was like, wait, hold up. And they pull out a laptop and headphones and they make a beat out of it. And it's like really silly or whatever. But like that metaphor is so, it goes so deep. It goes so deep. And the cool thing is that once you start to hear this of what I'm talking about, it really is difficult to turn off. And it's really freaking cool. And on one end, it makes remixing really fun because you don't have to worry so much about trying to preserve the original idea. You can just literally take one sound and start spinning the sounds into lots of different ways or whatever and create really cool stuff. Or you start, finding different ways to hear something in a different way that is outside of the normal context. So what I mean by that is, we can take anything in here. For one, there is an aspect of exploring sound and knowing how to quote unquote sound design. But if you've watched my other videos, you will know that I tend to just chuck anything in here. I'm going to close my eyes. Cool. So let's say I wanted to take a spin on this, and something that I could do is initially, like, honestly, just chuck a bunch of effects in here. The part that I'm going to be doing right now is not the part that I want you to pay attention to. So even if you want to skip ahead in the video to where like I get a bunch of weird sounds and stuff, that would be okay. This might be useful to some people, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be changing this sound and turning it into something completely different, because I want to get sounds that I've never heard before. And I think that's one of the big things and one of the funnest things about doing this kind of stuff is that you can utilize this to kind of liberate yourself from having to be like, oh, I need to, make a bass. I need to make a snare now. I need to do whatever. And no, you need to just like have fun and make sounds off of stuff that you are. Why isn't that working? Oh, that's because I need another random. So anyways, we'll kind of move this around kind of like so, and just let that kind of play around. And then what we'll do is we'll take a shift, and we'll just kind of let that jump around and set that to bipolar. And with this, now we can kind of just take a spin and maybe play around with different spacing. So we could chuck something like Portal in here. Portal I still use quite a bit. It's a lot of fun, and especially just getting randomized stuff. But the context of this, like I said, is not what's important. What is important is just playing around with different effects that you have and utilizing it, even if it's not like modulated. Like you can set a bunch of stuff on here that's like stagnant. So for example, like a chorus. Let's use the new Felx chorus. I'm going to have a review on this at some point. But one thing that we do want to do is maybe clip this. So I'll use a fuse compressor, and then I'll use a saturator. And like I said, this stuff isn't important, but I'm just tossing stuff in here that are my normal go-to tools. I'm turn the clipping on, turn this stuff up. Now, I don't know what this is going to sound like, and I don't really care. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to start turning knobs and listening to how this sounds, and we're just going to create something, but it's going to be just probably a bunch of hot garbage. So let's add a transient shaper to this. So we got a bunch of nonsense, right? And what most people would likely say is anything that's within this is, you know, some garbage. And in most cases, I would agree with you. But through this chaos that we've created, there is so much potential for different ideas, different things that you can hear. And by doing this and by setting something up like this to where you initially like have zero context about what's happening, it's up to you to kind of find stuff in here and to start listening for things that could be interesting. Now, the issue that I think most people run into is that once they do this process, because I know that like for some people this takes a really long time, even for me it took, you know, a few minutes or whatever. And there's definitely like an art to this, but like it could have been anything, you know, regardless. And I've done that. You guys have seen me do this in so many videos, but what I'm getting at is that this is a great example because it's nothing specific, but hearing stuff and listening to something that catches your ear is kind of what you want to practice. And if you can't hear anything, then just pick something. You know, you can literally close your eyes again and be like, I'm going to take this. And now, because we've decided to take this, we are going to commit to making a riff out of this. And this is the cultivation aspect of it. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but we can start to hear something and start to play around with it and start to practice utilizing and changing this into something that will fit to get an idea for a track started. So let's just go ahead and audition. Okay, so what happens if I move this and change this into repitch mode? Okay, so we can take this first part, you know, do, and we might be able to push this a little bit late. And this is the part that I'm talking about like being willing to go the extra step. Okay, so these two things are kind of percussive. So what we can do is we can create a riff out of this and just start with a phrase that fits within this bar, kind of like so. Okay, well, that's not quite where I want it to be, but we can start to spread this out again and maybe play with something like this and just see where we're at. So maybe we can utilize. Okay. So what I'm doing now is just kind of playing around and placing different stuff and utilizing the chops or whatever to try to come up with some kind of phrase, some kind of call and response. So let's see what this sounds like. Now the thing is that even though all of this is off time and that I'm working on this, it's fit within a bar. And while I'm not necessarily convinced on this, the most important thing that I'm looking for outside of timbre is rhythm. So if I can find something that has a cool infectious groove or something that has a lot of interest, then I can actually start to put intention into this and change it into anything that I want it to be. Because like to me, rhythm is king. Because if I wanted to, I could post something on here and go say Pro Q3 or something like that. And you can do this a lot of different ways, but I can actually even make a chord out of this if I wanted to. If you take something like this and we say, okay, this is going to be D sharp 4, then this one's going to be, let's say G sharp. This one is going to be A sharp, but maybe an octave higher. Well, now by pulling this up, so I'm going to put a limiter on this because it might get kind of crazy. Notice that I'm not putting a clipper on it, I'm putting a limiter on it, and that's because I want this to not go past that loudness. Okay, but you see here that through this, we're actually creating some kind of tone out of this now. And what we could also do is we can start to try to isolate these frequencies in order to make something out of it. Now, if I were to even just take something like this and add ROM to it or something. Okay, so let's take that and let's throw this into a sampler now. And within this, I know that this is in E, so I'll take that and place it in E. Wait, D sharp, sorry. So that way this will be in key. Sorry, that was the wrong thing that I took. It was supposed to be this. Okay, let's try that again. So I'm not really sure why that's doing that, because that's taking the actual sample of that. That's interesting. So let's go ahead and try that one more time. Let's take this and then let's make a sampler again. See what that does. Maybe. Okay, so that's obviously a bug, because whatever it is that I'm pulling through this is not supposed to be doing that. What's going on here? Oh, that's why. Because I'm playing the Serato sample. I'm really smart. Anyways. If we were to add something like this. Well, now we've got some kind of atmosphere. And it doesn't even need to, like, obviously, like, we made a chord or a pad out of this, but I've already got it, right? So to me, what I'm trying to get to is, like, just to a point to where I start hearing stuff to where I'm like, you know what, I could write a beat over that. I could write something over that, because part of it is a part of, sorry, excuse me, let me start over. Part of it is developing a, how do you say, musical intuition, but a lot of that comes from the development of the trial and error aspect of what I just showed you. But if I were to record this, oh man, this is gonna be cool. So do you hear a beat over that? Because I do. And this is a great example about what I'm talking about. You know, we can do another one just for fun, but this is a great example about, like, sometimes you have to go an extra step in order to start hearing something, or sometimes you have to, you know, because you're usually just 1 or 2 steps away from hearing something really cool and actually getting an idea for a musical piece. And the reason why I like doing this as well is because I'm not conforming myself necessarily to a key. I'm not conforming to, you know, a time measurement or a specific instrument that has been recognized as something, right? Even within the realms of electronic music, right? Because within electronic music, we have like a whole different orchestra of shit, of plucks, pads. You know, we never call an instrument like a piano or something a pad, right? That's something that's been developed electronically. But when you look at it through the lens of yo, it's just a sound. It's just a thing that sounds cool. It's just something there, and you try to put it into a musical context. It changes the way that you start listening to stuff. It changes the way that you do it both within context of music, because to me, like, you ever like listen to somebody and they're like, how the hell did you do that? Obviously, a lot of times it's like, if you ask somebody, they'll say like, I don't know, I was just messing around. But you'll listen, especially for the people that I listen to, like, you'll hear all these variations of a single sound that somebody made, and there's just all these different expressions of it. You hear it in my music all the time, all the time. I finished this collaboration that I was doing with G Space. What was it, Friday? And I made almost the entire sound suite out of a piano sound. I'm talking drums, I'm talking percussion. Like, I made all of that from one piano loop. That doesn't mean that I'm saying that I'm an amazing sound designer or anything like that. It just, I've worked at this skill set for so long that it starts to take me in those directions. You know, if you wanted to make this into, you know, a bass, you can. There's certain rules that, or certain guides that fall within a bass. There's certain things that fall within the pad, like I just showed you, right? There's certain things that fall within making this percussion, you know, a little bit tighter. So let's say I don't want to use the extractor, but I change this into like a transient shaper, and I try to make everything a little bit more, just a little bit more close, a little bit more tight in that way, and pulling the sustain down. Well, this is a percussion trick, but you can also use this for kicks and snares. That's where the fundamentals of sound design start to come in. But the inception of it is hearing something, just hearing anything, because you might hear this stuff and might go in a completely different direction. And that's where the individualism will come in. But, you know, even just, you know, taking this and being like, okay, let me turn off the ROM on this. Okay, so this is a great example of like how far you can versus how far you need to go. But check this out, because I already hear something within this too. So we might want to change this into a bar, but check this out. Do 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 do. So let's see what that sounds like. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but so now if we kind of back off of this and we don't pull a chord out of this, like, we can start to pick something different if we wanted to. We can create a custom comb filter. This is a physical modeling trick, but we can set this chord somewhere else. So now we've, you know, we can just put something very simple over this. Okay, that's 808. It's not my favorite, but let's do something different. Let's just put a clap over this. Maybe one that's not so. The thing is like, we can make this clap, any of these claps, into something different, but bonk. Okay, we'll just use this. This is one of mine. But we'll just use the first transient. So we set this on the 2, and then we set this here. Now we've got an anchor point. Now something that we can do is we have intention. Now we can start being like, okay, well, let's develop a relationship with this. I like to put a little bit of silence before the clap, because it makes it feel like it's giving it like a skip, if that makes sense. And for me, this is something that actually both Aiden and Zane taught to me. So there's all that into play. But right, so maybe with this, you know, we can listen to this part, but maybe what we can do is move this over to where it's going to line up with the clap. And then is this set to, no, it's not, but we can set this to repitch mode and make this into something that's going to be like a clap layer. And then we can probably turn it down, but okay, that was even cooler. Now I'm hearing something, so listen to this relationship, this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bounce this, and I'm going to turn this off. Okay, it didn't do it that time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to listen to it up here and pull it out of rolling sampler. Now you saw on that part that we, it was like a do-do-do-goo. And if I can't make it, then I'll just pull it out and just resample this rhythm anyways, but it's okay. But I heard the do-do-do-do. And so I want that rhythm to be in here now. So if I turn this off, let's see what that does. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So we can just take this and find a relationship now to where we can rebuild that. So I think it's like here. And maybe we can set this to repitch and start moving on. Now, I don't want to go much further than this because this gets into actual just production, but what I'm trying to get at was like I found an idea very quickly that inspired me, and I chose to stick with it. So there it is. Right? So this is the kind of stuff that teaches you how to cultivate, that teaches you how to listen, that teaches you how to get into making really cool stuff. If you turn your brain on to it, it's not something that like, I mean this in the nicest way, and I say this whenever I have YouTube arguments with people, which is not often, but I can explain it to you. I can't understand it for you, if that makes sense. But at the same time, this path that has honestly been taught to me as something that I've internalized and something that I have really come to enjoy with making tunes out of. Because the thing is that I got this far and now I'm into it, and I know what it takes now to get this from through lots of practice from this concept to a finished track. And that's why it's so important to practice finishing beats and all that other stuff, and lots of lessons within this. But this wouldn't have even come together if I wouldn't know how to pull stuff from this, if I wouldn't know how to listen, not only in the music, but also in the chaos, in the midst of anything, really. Any kind of sound is musical. And I hear this all the time now. Like, that's why I have to always have my phone with me, because I've got so many samples and stuff that I have on my phone that like I have yet to act upon. But like, there's this thing, like I carry this around with me whenever I go to the gym, and I was holding this cup, bringing it in from my car on my way home from the gym, and there's this sound that this created that I was just like, and I was like, oh, I gotta sample that because that was so sick. You know what I mean? Or even just that, like dun 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 dun, like rhythm is everywhere. It's so fucking crazy, you all. And I know that I sound like a crazy person right now, but embrace it. Embrace it, embrace it. If you are truly about beat making, you are truly about, you know, finding yourself within the world of music, I would say, like, go down this rabbit hole. What do they say in No More Heroes? Like, head for the Garden of Madness, because in this midst of things that you will find, rhythm is everywhere, and it will be infectious, but like, it's very enjoyable. And you're able to reap a lot of benefits from it because you don't worry so much about all the other stuff. You don't worry so much about the details of, oh, my snare, this and this, or oh, this clap, whatever. It's like, nah, man, just make these compositions and make them work together. And this works really well in terms of beats. You know, remember that because we have insane technology at our fingertips, that we can turn anything into something musical. So, you know, pitch map, or even just using that stupid EQ trick that I was talking about. all that stuff. Like there's so many ways to add notational expression to the sounds that we make. But for me, my core is rhythm. And once I have a groove, once I have something like that, I am off to the races with creating something that I'm going to, you know, at least be happy with, or at least be into, or something that I can, you know, put on repeat. That's why I love this genre of music that I make. I just love this approach, and I give a lot of credit to my teachers and stuff from this thing that I've cultivated. But I believe that it's within all of you, especially if you just change the way that you listen, change the way that you start to hear stuff, and be open-minded to that dumb idea that you're like, well, that could be cool, and then you never act upon it. I don't know if you've done that before, but that first idea that you have, if you hear something that can go with it, act on it, jump on it, and make something cool out of it, because you will be so much more successful, and you will find so much more, I guess, like personal fulfillment if you do this. So I don't know. I know that this video was kind of abstract, and I know that I kind of got lost for a couple minutes when I accidentally forgot that I had the Serato sample going on at the same time. But yeah, man, like this makes beat making so much more fun. And I can't tell you, like, I don't feel like I'm crazy anymore and having to bash my head against the wall like I was in 2021 through 2020, or 2019 through 2022. So anyways, I know that this was a lot of crazy thoughts and stuff, but I don't know. I feel like it has to be candid, because I can't prepare a lesson for you like this in order to get the point across. Even if I were to edit this video, like you kind of just need to embrace the process. And if you do, like I said, it'll be a lot of fun. So thank you guys. I really appreciate you all sticking through this. If you watch this entire video, I hope that you got something out of it. If you want to buy a shirt, we've got new merch. If you want to book a lesson with me, then there's that. Check out my sounds at alckemy.com. I've also got an old album on there. I really want to like try to get people to, I need to put music out, but I really want to get people to be like, yo, like stop advertising all that other shit and be like, yo, buy my tunes. What can you say? Much love, everybody. I'll see you on the next one. Let me know if there's anything else that you'd like me to cover in the future. That would be helpful. And I'd like to give you my thoughts on whatever it is that I might have a thought-provoking opinion on.